because other people do see it. All right. Jesus, keep me near the cross, there a precious fountain, free to all a healing stream, flows from Calvary's mountain. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, a trembling soul, love and mercy found me. There the bright and morning star sheds its beams around me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, O Lamb of God, bring its scenes before me. Help me walk from day to day with its shadows o'er me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, I'll watch and wait, hoping, trusting ever, till I reach the golden strand, just beyond the river. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river.
Yes, sir, please. Turn your Bibles to the book of Philippians. It's going to take a little bit before I get there, but I want to give you a heads up. Chapter 4 is where we're going to look at the scriptures tonight. It took me about 3.5 hours to go through the 500 and some pictures that I took, and I took some from my daughter's Facebook account, some things that I didn't have, and so I've tried to do this right, and I hope it'll be a blessing to you. But I really want you to see what it's like in the Philippines. Now, some of you have gone, Dee Dee and Daniel, and a few have gone over, and some have expressed an idea would like to go. And the neat thing about missions is you can go to the Philippines. I've been there 3 times, and each time it's been different. I've been to Ukraine 3 times, and each time it was different. a different experience. Part of that is you learn from previous experiences, and so you have different expectations each time. But God does a work in your heart, and you start to see things. And I think what I like about taking missions trips is it gives you a fresh perspective of this church and what we're trying to do. And when Joyce said she didn't think she was going to make it tonight, she said, "Can I watch the service online?" And I have my computer here, so she can't watch it on that. And I said, "I think you can watch it on our TV. We have a YouTube account that we can look on there." And I found an old video that Jonathan and I had made on Grace Baptist Church. I believe it was 2015. And it's a little outdated by some of the pictures and things and some of the statistics, but I thought, wow, that was pretty well done. But a picture gives you a snapshot of what's going on, and I can only write about a picture so much. I wanted to be able to explain some things, both some of the goofy things that were misconstrued on Facebook, and also some of the things that I couldn't explain, writing it down. So we're just going to start, and if you guys get the lights, leave that side on. I know it might take you a couple times to get the light on, and I'm not sure how far I can go. I'm going to try to get out of your way. All right, can you take off the center light? Wrong one.
The third one.
All right, here we go. This is our, keep in mind again, because we were trying to save some money, we flew separately out of, I should not have touched it. We flew out of Cleveland at different times. I left at 6:30, she left at 7, and then we met again in Shanghai. Not something I ever want to do again, but it was an interesting experience, and we can tell you about it. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Is that on? Okay. And then we arrived in Cebu about 4 a.m. They let us sleep for a few hours, and then we had this picture taken with the kids. I think we looked pretty good for traveling the way we did. And it was so good to be with them and to be able to hold Philip for the first time. And they're doing very well. Philip is a grunter, he is a snorter, and he loves to eat. And he's hard to be burped. A lot of Filipino life is done at the mall. I know that sounds funny, but they have government places in the mall, built into the mall, and so we were preparing to go to the mall to exchange our money, and the mall was hopping, and in there, as we were going through, I found this display. We got there January 27th, and the 20th was Sinulog. That is the island of Cebu's celebration of their saint, who is supposed to be Jesus, and I'll show you, I think there's another picture here, a little close-up. And all of these, there's a lining of saints on both sides, and those who participate in the parade have their own saint to hold up, and they dance with him and different things. It's not anything like what we do around here, and it really is idol worship. They are reverencing and showing worship towards a statue, which is strictly forbidden in Scripture, and that's one of the first things we came into contact with while there. Then we had our first Sunday service. This is North Cebu Baptist Church. Their theme is on faith. They just instead of calling it faith, they say keep on believing in God. That's their idea as well. And that's the church. Pastor Elburn is now the pastor. He's the national pastor, Brother Elburn Ballas, and doing a great job. And God is using him mightily. There was a baptism service. Interestingly enough, the husband of the woman being baptized is from Granville, Ohio, which is about 20 minutes away from where I grew up. And he's my age, but that would be like saying, hey, somebody grew up in Grove City, and, we don't know each other? You know. I had a guy from the Philippines when I was at the airport leaving, coming back, and they saw I was flying into Cleveland. Oh, he says, "You know LeBron James?" Yeah, I know him. Not personally. He has no idea who I am. But there was a baptism service. It was a wonderful service. Good way to start off our time there. This is that man, and this is how they traveled there. He's got their little boy on the front of that, and then she, after the baptism, was going to try to stay from getting wet by using that contraption on top of their motorcycle. That's common to them. They don't even think twice about it. Joyce and I sang at the service, and I got to hold Philip. I enjoy doing that. I've done that, I think, with every one of my grandchildren. They have some new looking trikes. Those are motorcycles and a trike, and you can put, I've seen as many as 7 on a motorcycle. I've probably seen 10 come off of one of those trikes, and you couldn't do that in America. We're too big. Then this is one of our meals. On the Monday after that Sunday, Brother Chris and I and Brother Elburn traveled to where they have their church camp coming up in April, and we were just making sure that everything was set to reserve it. We get there, and they are under major construction. So it's something that we don't see in our news cycle, because if you remember when they had martial law in Mindanao to stop the terrorists in Mindanao, because he was so effective in killing so many Muslim terrorists, America gave them a reward. There was a reward for the killing of terrorists, and America gave them millions of dollars, and their president is putting it in rebuilding the country. And when we get to the schools, one of the things he was rebuilding is he gave money to the schools, and everything that they did last year at the school, they can't do this year because of construction. So they had to use that school and a high school that was adjacent to it. And so we drove the hour and a half to get to the school, and we reserved the one side, and they were hoping, and I found out they have since reserved the other side. But we came back, and on the edge of Cebu there was a restaurant, and that middle plate there is a pork dish, and you can't tell what it is. And I told today Joyce, that's why I'm telling you now. I wasn't going to tell anybody, but it's pig feet. How many of you ever tried pig feet? It actually was pretty good. And I know it sounds disgusting, but if you have never tried it, just shut up. It was pretty good. This was one of the meals. And then at the same mall, they have a great place. This is one of those vacation times, I guess, where you get to make your own ice cream bar, and Micah enjoyed it quite a bit. Best ice cream bar I've ever had in my life, no question. And yeah, he enjoyed it. You can't really see from the picture, but he's got it all over his face. And then we travel. They don't have car seats over there. There are no car seats. And I had some people really upset that we didn't have our children in car seats, but if they don't have them, nobody uses car seats over there. And you can say what you want, but that's the way it is. And Philip was having a good trip too. One of the things we got was his birth certificate. Notice the name. I love this about the Philippines. They use the maiden name as the part of the middle name of the child. So my grandchildren in the Philippines bear my name. Amen. Baron Philip Michael Troyer. It's Philip Michael Troyer Baron is how you say it, but that's how they have it written on there. And that was a very important piece of paper. Now they can work to get his documentation for dual citizenship, and he'll be able to travel to America. There's a lot of things we do around eating, and this was the Lighthouse, called the Lighthouse, and one of our favorite places to eat. Look at this. This is the bottom picture, bottom to the right, is a granite slab about 8 foot long, 25 inches wide, 24 inches wide, and the pesos, 10,399, sounds like a lot of pesos, but it's about $200. If you would buy that equivalent in America, it's about $2,500. You say, how is it so cheap? Because we're right next to China, which is where everything comes from. And that's the most expensive slab that they have. And when I talked to one of the Filipinos at the church, And I said, we got to buy that slab now while it's cheap. He said, oh no, that's expensive. You need to go to this places and you can find it a lot cheaper. And I'm like, oh, I want to take one of these slabs home with me, you know. The picture on the left is the mall. It's a 5-layer mall. Ladies, yeah, it's they do so much around the mall. And if you want your repair guy, he's climbing on the wires. By the way, these are not electric wires. These are cables for telephones and internet and all that sort of thing. But still, you wonder why you would lose your connection. This guy's climbing on the wires. It's pretty amazing. Just things you don't see in America. And then, can you tell those are pigs' faces? Where they skin the face of a pig and then they cook that. Ladies, you know what they call that? In the Filipino word is mascara. Mascara. It means a face mask. So careful what you put on your face. This was a great surprise to me. My daughter says, "Oh, Dad, you've got to try this." When she described it, I wasn't going to. And it's called mint winter melon tea with jelly balls. You ask what a jelly ball is. There's nothing like it in America. But my first thought was, no, I'm not going to have that. And then she gave it to me. And then she took this response of me. And people thought it was alcoholic by my response. It really wasn't. I was surprised. I was excited that, this is good. She got the picture right at the right time. And she enjoys getting those kind of pictures from me. Just different things. The picture on the left is a fish with a great big globe on its head. They had a huge display in the mall of people that raised these fish and then were competing, much like 4-H would compete with animals. Being on an island, they deal with fish, and I can't remember the name of the fish, but it was an ugly thing. And that's a dad with their little daughter, his little daughter on the front of the motorcycle. Very common. You see 2 and 3 kids on those kinds of things, and it's very common to them. Traveling is different, and the pictures don't do it justice. The one on the right is when we're on the ferry. That's Chris's van through the doorway, and they have to do things to get from one island to another. There's not a bridge that covers that, and so you just have to travel different ways. We're going to Tagbayan, and I'll explain. Caleb said that I had gotten on the wrong boat and got lost. No. What happened is that Chris gave me the itinerary. He told me we're going to see Pastor Rex, and then we're going to see Pastor Raxon and Pastor Joe DeCurtis. Well, the way he said it, he didn't say it like that. I thought Rex and Raxon were the same pastor, and Raxon is on Bohol. So when we're heading to Rex's church, I'm thinking we're going to Bohol. So I'm making all these announcements, we're going to Bohol. And then I find out after we get on the island, my daughter says, "Dad, we're not on Bohol." And I was so confused by then, I didn't know. I was trying to figure out what in the world was going on. And so I enjoyed making fun of myself. This is on the ferry. That's Chris standing up on the one side and Elizabeth there in the middle. And my granddaughter came and stood with me and watched. She's not afraid of anything. I tell you, she wanted to stand on the edge, lean out and over, and I'm trying to hold on to her. She was not afraid of anything. This is their missions board for North Cebu Baptist Church. They are trying to raise people have pledged 32,100 pesos towards missions, and these are their missionaries that they support. That's very important. Towards the end of the video or the pictures, you're going to see those missionaries. Now, we support Brother Chris in this work that they're doing, and it's much like supporting our missionaries here, but our mission work is going towards other mission work out of that ministry, and so we're getting a benefit from that as well. Again, more kids. That's what to get to their house. This is the street we went through every day, and that's not necessarily a busy time right there. It's just a lot of people, and motorcycles, cars, vehicles, and sometimes you're like, how in the world are we going to get there? This was our first trip. That's the picture on the right is me saying I was lost. Somebody said I looked like the guy from Up, the dad from Up. We go to a restaurant. We get to our hotel. Saturday night, we get to the hotel after we took the ferry there, and we go to a restaurant to get something to eat, and one of the restaurants had a place where you could sit down on the ground on a pillow that I really was not interested in all, but my grandchildren ran to that place and sat down, and so it actually turned out pretty good. Not while we were eating, because it's hard to eat when you're sitting up and uncomfortable on the floor, but as soon as you're done eating, man, that was a great place to relax, and that's what Joyce and I was. And I spared you some of the romance pictures that we were having. That's one of my favorite pictures of Joyce, and you can't see it very well. Maybe this will show a little better. That is, to me, a priceless picture for why we went over there. And Philip's eyes were open, and so's were Joyce. And we had breakfast the next Sunday morning before I was going to preach, and their pancakes are basically crepes, if you know what a crepe is. Very thin pancakes rolled up together, and it was very tasty, very good. That's Pastor Rex. Now, if you know, you've heard of the Filipinos from the Marietta group. They go down. He is one of those pastors that wants to go to Marietta. Now, this raises a lot of questions to me. I've always been concerned about the group in Marietta, whether that's the most efficient way, the best thing. And there have been some bad examples. Every college has bad examples of students. And there have been some guys that have come over from the Philippines, raised their money, and gone home and bought a brand new vehicle or something like that. That's not our desire. And Pastor Rex, we tried to talk him out of desiring to go to America because they see it as the land of opportunity where they can get more money and things like that. And it begged the question to me, if we wanted to support a national, how would we know whether he is a honorable person that we have some relationship with? And the answer to that is my son-in-law, Chris, because he investigates these people and tries to find out as much as he can without, I mean, they're autonomous. They're a church just like, if somebody wanted to come and see if I was an honorable pastor, how would you do that? Without trampling over the fact that we are an autonomous church. This is how we do it here, and if you don't like that, that's fine, but don't try to upset the apple cart. And we came in and had a good service with them. Later on that day, Chris went with Brother Walter and preached to these kids. There's about 40 to 50 kids there, and some other ones came a little bit later. And this is through a school program. You're allowed to teach religious education in the schools. Now, if you get too controversial, they have removed some pastors from teaching in the schools because they become anti this religion, that religion, and so you have to be smart about going in there. But this is a ministry that Brother Walter's building on Tabaglion, and that they are trying to start a church there. He's been there almost 3 years and is doing a great work, and we're trying to encourage him to start a church there. And Brother Walter would be worthy of support if you wanted to support somebody like that. I don't know if you can see on the motorcycle, there's a guy carrying something. Those are chickens, alive chickens. Do they do that in America? If you turn a chicken upside down, they don't try to get out of your hand?
They'll flutter a little bit, but once they stop fluttering, they're fine.
Well,
Yeah,
they obviously,
so you hang them by their feet.
yeah, they obviously know they can go nowhere because they're just dangling along as they go driving down the road. You got to think what's in that chicken's brain if he has one. On the same Sunday, I preached a message, Chris preached a message, and then Brother Walter. This is all one there's 3 families there, but they're all related, and he does a Bible study with them after he does the other studies. He has 8. When an island is an island that people can live on, but it's not big enough to sustain itself. They call them islets. So they'll have a little bit of a town, a semblance of a town, and there's usually a bridge. It's close enough that a bridge can get you there. He has 8 islets that he is reaching with Bible studies, and we're trying to tell him, how are you going to start a church and have people come from all those places? He basically is setting it up where you could almost put 3 or 4 churches on that island with the people that he is developing. And so we're trying to encourage him, and he's doing a great job. Great worker, loves the Lord, great soul winner, and very diligent, knows his Bible inside and out. This was a Mennonite family we met at that church. They had a Mennonite missionary on that island who went home due to illness, and they were looking for somebody to support with the money that they were giving their missionary. And they had been supporting Pastor Rex. They found Brother Walter and bought him a motorcycle, and I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. You never know where God's supply comes from. But they were faithful, and they live in Indiana and have their own construction business. I just thought it was unique. I never went there expecting to meet a Mennonite in the Philippines. We had 2 vacation days. When we came back on Monday after that Sunday of all those services, we didn't stay at this resort. We stayed in a hotel. And by the way, never had hot water in any of the hotels we stayed. I'm not used to that. I did that when I was in Ghana. Didn't like it then, don't like it now. And I was relaxing. We were only going to stay till about 10 o'clock, and then we were going to head back over to Cebu. But the water was so far out, they said, by 9 it'll be in. It was still out. You couldn't enjoy the water. So Chris said, well, we'll just stay. We didn't really have anything planned, so we'll just make this a whole day. And that's when I got the bad sunburn on my ankles and blisters. But I was laying on a hammock resting, and all of a sudden one of the workers, the hammock was from 2 trees. And all of a sudden one of the workers, I feel the hammock doing this, and he's climbing up the tree, and he turns loose a coconut. And I looked at him, and Chris came over, and he was kind of smirking. I said, what's he doing? He said, well, some foreigner wants a coconut. Well, the guy went over, did a few hatchet jobs on the coconut, and then brought it to me. He said, you're the foreigner. And so I got to drink fresh coconut juice, which is not really refreshing. It's supposed to be very good for you. But after I get done, he says, now, this is going to cause you a problem when you go to the bathroom for the next hour or 2. I really appreciated that. And then after I drank the juice, you use a spoon, and I never experienced this kind of a coconut. There's different kinds of coconuts, and it has just a thin layer of coconut that's slimy and a little grotesque to the texture, but very yummy. And that's what I was eating. Chris ate some, and Chris's mom ate some, and it was just a great time. That is the water. I mean, you can't. But there's nobody on the beach. This is not though there's a resort there. This is not the place where all the tourists go. This is a nice place you can go, but if you want to go scuba diving, there's certain islands that you go to for that. And because of that, we were there virtually alone. And the people that were working, when the water was way out, there were older ladies that we would consider retirement age were out there with buckets digging through and finding shells. And I have a gift for all our widow ladies that I bought, and it's the necklaces they made from the shells that they dug through all day long. I felt terrible. Here somebody's out there digging through sand getting shells, and I'm swimming and having fun, and I felt kind of guilty. So I thought at least I could buy some necklaces, and I decided to give them to our widows. This is what we looked like on the way back. If it tells you, we were exhausted. Oh, you can't really see. Oh, here, look. That's Joyce right in the front there. She's wiped out. And that's the island of Malapascua that was devastated by the typhoon 3 or 4 years ago. And that's something we want to go see someday, but that's very primitive, what they call provincial, meaning that they don't have their own electric. If you have electric, it's because you own a generator. And there's a missionary and his wife that have been there for several years out of North Carolina, and their health is getting bad, and they're having to make a decision what they're going to be doing for the future. I've seen sheets of plywood on the back of motorcycles where the guy's holding on like this. This guy, I don't know how many times they almost hit somebody. And matter of fact, he was scolded by an older lady who was walking on the side, and he stopped and started carrying it so he could control it better. But an older woman, the older women have a lot of say over there in the Philippines. You don't mess with grandma. They come back on Monday. We spent all day Monday. We come back on Tuesday. We spent the extra night there, and then we have Tuesday that we prepare to leave on Wednesday for the next island of Bohol. And this was a different kind of a ferry, much nicer, much faster. We could have taken the other ferry, but it would have taken 4 hours. This took us 2 hours to get to the island of Bohol. And there we are. There's the island welcoming us into the island of Bohol. And a pastor, Pastor Joe DeCurtis, who's been there 13 years, meets us with a jeepney, and that's how we traveled around the island. We all climbed into the back of that. No air conditioning. The air conditioning was the windows were rolled up. The plastic was rolled up on the sides. When it rains, they bring the plastic down so you don't get all wet from that. And, sorry, I shouldn't have put this. The Filipinos have a strange sense of humor. Every time you take a serious picture, they almost always want to do what they call a wacky. They mean wacky. But wacky, so we made a face. And that's just one of my many faces and one of her many faces. This is the Cortez Baptist Church. We get on to the jeepney. He takes us to his church because we have enough time and shows us his ministry that he built. And I thought you should see this. That is the bottom. When they bought the property, it was all jungle, all rocks and trees and overgrown. And they built the sidewalk, and that's the church that is up there. And that's a kind of a broad view. On the left is their fellowship hall. On the right are the quarters for the Bible Institute students and the staff that live there. This was they're announcing the conference for Chris. Being the main speaker for the mission conference. It's a great opportunity. It's one of the things that Chris is going to be doing as an arm from NCBC. He's going to be going to churches and encouraging missions programs and missions giving, something that is not brand new to the Philippine Islands, but most Filipinos have been taught so long that they're poor that they don't have to give. No. Christ honored a widow with 2 mites over everybody's gift because she gave of all that she had. So even the poor can give. The Philippines, Philippians, was one of the poorest churches, and yet they gave the most to the Apostle Paul's needs. So then after seeing his church ministry, we went to the hotel. This is the hotel, very nice hotel. I go into my bedroom, which was a king-size bed, 2 twin beds put together, and a little piece of foam in between the two, and about that thick of padding, and it's firm. That's a little more firm than we're used to. And I went into the bathroom, and sure enough, there's this hot water heater tank on the wall, and I'm thinking, yes! Until I went to take my shower, and then found out it didn't work. And I didn't want a reputation. I've seen Americans make Americans look very bad in the foreign field where they are spoiled and they got to have everything. So I decided we were not going to say anything about not having water. They have to know. And by the way, this hotel was a unique hotel. 90% of the workers are deaf. I think it's an American. I'm not sure. It might have been a European. But he had a burden for the deaf people in the Philippines. And so he built this hotel with the intention of giving a place for deaf people to get a job. And the funny thing is when you start doing, because they have sign language everywhere, so you know how to do things. And I was asking for coffee grinder, and she said, "Oh, you want some coffee?" Not only did she hear and speak, but she spoke pretty good English. And we both laughed because I'm thinking she's deaf. And it was a great place to stay. But then we left. Chris and I left the ladies at the hotel, and we climbed into the jeepney and traveled 2.5 hours across the island. This is, I wanted you to see that too. Yeah, that is construction. You can see it's down to one lane. There's no berm. It's about that high, and there's no flaggers, nobody out there directing traffic. You just pull onto that and hope that nobody else is coming, because somebody's going to have to back up if you are, because you're not going to pull off to the side on this one. That's how they do it all over the place. They're just common to that. You can see that the equipment they have on the side, nobody was working, but everything was kind of shut down to one lane. It's just the way they do things. This is a field of rice. I was sharing with Sarah today. I have multiple pictures of rice from different stages, where they have one section of the field is a different stage of the next, and rice grows continually throughout the year, and they have waterways that they flood areas, and they plant their rice, and then they go through it, and the next step is they put it on the side of the road to dry. It's pretty neat. And I could give you multiple pictures of that too, but it's just fascinating. And you'll see the grandparents out there with a rake, standing, walking on the rice, scraping it and turning it over, just like you're cooking it almost. And what they're doing is knocking the kernels off the rice, just like you would, I don't know, something else that has kernels on it. That's the island of Bohol. You can't really see it real good. We landed on the southern side, and we drove to the northern side, and we saw 2 Baptist churches on the way, and the only other churches we saw were cults: Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and the in Cristo de Iglesia. I'm not saying that exactly right. No, but that's not what they are. This was, we finally got to Ubai on the other side, and this is the church sign, and he was all upset because some teenagers had pelted the sign with rocks, and so it didn't look as pristine as he wanted us to see it looking. He was trying to put on a nice display of their ministry and what they had. That's the road going back, so you can see immediately you get off the highway, you're down to pretty rough roads. And it gets worse. This is turning into their lane, and if we would have had a heavy rain the night before, we probably wouldn't have gotten in. And this is the building. They built that little building on the left for Pedro Balabas to live in as an intern. Brother, you got it good. And living in the cottage. And that's the church on the right there. That's Brother Peter. On the right, there's Chris, and then that's Brother Raxon. And that's his house that he lives in. It's roughly 2 rooms and no running water. They have bottled water and no air conditioning, obviously. That's the church. The neat thing was, and I think I shared it with you this morning, because we were coming, they had not yet on Wednesday nights had evening services at the church. They would have them in people's houses because they did not have electric yet or lights yet in the church building. But because we were coming, they worked extra hard to try to get the lights up. Was it here that I talked about the chairs? Or was it at Burton? I was here. But they stacked up the chairs and put a ladder on the chairs, and the chair's about to fall over, and Peter almost died, and they had a fun time telling us that story. And but it was really an amazing thing. That's the inside of the church. You will be able to, I don't know if you'll be able to read it. The banner on the back is their theme for this year, To the Regions Beyond, which is what our theme was a couple years ago. But what helped me to see, here we are supporting a missionary who has an intern of theirs going to a church on the far reaches of this island, and their goal is the regions beyond, the same as ours. I thought that is missions. That's what missions is supposed to do. It's supposed to reproduce itself. This church's goal is to reproduce itself, not just to build a church, not one church, but to reproduce itself, so there are many churches that spawn off of it. And that's the goal that we are trying to work towards. That's Brother Peter. I'd ask you to pray for him. Brother Raxon is a hard, I hope he's not watching, he is a hard man to work with. In that Peter is inexperienced in some areas in his life. There are some deficiencies. And Brother Raxon is trying to help him learn and grow in those areas so he is a stronger Christian and that he has a well-rounded understanding of life in general so that when he goes out and pastors people, he will have a good understanding of those things. But so pray for Brother Peter. This is Brother Raxon and his wife. They started the church 5 years ago, and I feel I offended her because the night we got there, we drove 2.5 hours to get there, and she made us dinner, which was chicken and rice, and the chicken tasted really good. I'm going to try to reproduce it using soy sauce and vinegar, and I tried to tell her it was really good, but I didn't want any more. And she took that as I didn't like it. I said, no, I'm preaching tonight. I don't want a full stomach. I don't like to preach on a full stomach. I'm not going to eat any more. And I almost felt like I needed to, but then I was afraid what would happen when I was preaching. But sweet people. This is, now think about it. You have an intern, 24 years old, I believe, fresh out of college, in a new area, serving the Lord, and they believe in accountability. And if I'm remembering this right, they took Norman here. I love these American names they give the Filipinos, but they took Norman and they have him living in the cottage with Brother Peter so that there's somebody to be accountable to and that they take care of each other in a proper way and help each other in the service. And they prepare the ministry of the church and the work there. Here's more rice. This is all kinds of families with rice out being cleansed or dried. We stopped at on the way there, I saw all these pineapple bushes scattered out, but there was only one short section of about 2 or 3 miles, and I said, hey, let's stop at one of these stands and get some pineapples. And Brother Axon told Chris, we've already passed them all. I said, well, we're coming back, we're going to stop. So we stopped, and we got 3 pineapples and a bunch of bananas, and I think we paid 300 pesos for them. And Chris did such a good job bartering that Brother Raxon was embarrassed that we paid so little. And I couldn't understand the bartering, what was going on, but it really was unique. And their bananas and their pineapples, no comparison to what we eat here. Much better, sweeter, although there's many kinds of bananas that I had no clue about. That is the Iglesia ni Cristo. They believe that when the rapture takes place, the entire church property is going up. Not the people, unless you're in it. Unless you're in it. Brother Walter, who we went to in that first island we went to, Tabagian, he was part of that cult before he got saved. And so I asked him some of the differences. They don't believe Christ is God. They believe in works. He said he calculated what they expected you to give towards the ministry, and it was roughly about 50% of your income. And that's what they believe will get them to heaven, doing those kinds of things. But you see them when they're blue. If they're blue, that means they're paid for. If they're any other color, they're at different stages. If it's green, that means it's just begun. If it's yellow, that means they're almost paid off. And when it turns blue, they're paid off. And you know the people have been properly milked for that. That's as much warning as you get for construction. I can't imagine driving at night. They don't have any reflectors. They don't have any signs other than these signs. I don't know if you can see that sign. I took a close-up. This way. I mean, get over right now, because you're going to die if you don't. And that's the construction. That's, again, no flaggers out there. I never saw anybody working. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. There were times when people were working, but not at this location. This is a lumber pile, cocoa wood. Everything he cut, he used a chainsaw. If you want a 2x4, you go up to him, you tell him I need a 2x4, and he takes up and cuts out a 2x4 out of a tree. And they say he's like, gets it very precise. As precise as a chainsaw can be. I took a picture because I was amazed. And he had a still chainsaw, by the way. Wow, that's impressive. It's a good saw. This is Brother Joe DeCurtis. So we traveled back on Thursday. The Brother Joe DeCurtis' church, the Cortez Baptist, has Wednesday or the midweek services on Thursday. So for the mission conference, it was Thursday, Friday, no Saturday service, and then Sunday. And Chris preached all of them. One of the reasons Chris told me to bring 10 messages is he thought I was going to be the speaker at the mission conference. I was okay that I wasn't. I enjoyed hearing Chris. About 20% of the stuff I understood because he spoke in their language. But that's Brother DeCurtis. Pray for Brother DeCurtis. His wife is a Filipino from Manila, Luzon area. She has 3 bad valves that there's not good hospitalization on Bohol. And they're having to make a decision. He hasn't been on furlough for 13 years. They came over for 6 weeks when their one son went to Bible college, and 4 weeks for the other son when he joined the military in the States. And that's all the time that they've come over in 13 years of being on the field. And they have to make a decision. If the doctor will release her go back to the Philippines, then they're not going to return to Cortez because the medical situation. They're going to go back to the area that she's from, Luzon, and start all over again. If they're able to, that's their desire. But if the doctors say her health is too critical, then they're not going to be able to go back. But we're planning on hopefully having him come in while they're in the States, and you'll see he is a twin to Tony Ledbetter. And it doesn't look like it there, but he really is. His mannerisms, everything, it's pretty cool. Enjoyed that about him. Our missionary to Haiti, if you don't know who that is. We sang in this church. Oh, I meant to tell you, if Joyce was here, she probably would have said something. But when we sang at the first church on the first island, they had, I don't know if you saw it, but the stairs for the platform was about this high. And I was sitting about where Rodney was, and Joyce was sitting next to me, and I wanted to beat her to the stairs so I could help her up the stairs. So I'm walking in front of her. That's unlike me. I would normally walk behind her, but I wanted to make sure she didn't try to get up the stairs by herself. Well, I saw it. She didn't. There was about a 1-inch step right about here that she never saw. So I'm walking to the stairs, getting ready to turn around, and all of a sudden I hear the crowd go, and I turn around, and Joyce is on the ground. She didn't see the little lip and went down, bruised her knee. Immediately it was black and blue, and I heard about that the rest of the trip, that I wasn't there to catch her. Wonder if she's watching still. This is John Mark. I thought, what a great name for a Filipino. If you're going to choose a name like John Mark, the apprentice. Turned away by the Apostle Paul and then joined again later in his life. And you can see Chris back there. He is not ready to be the pastor. Brother Raxon, what they're talking about now, Brother Raxon will pastor both the churches, but Brother John Mark will go and hold some of the services in Ubay until he can get a wife and until he can be ready. And we're not sure what the future of that lies, but it's going to be different. And that's all of us standing right there. I love being a tall American. They were acknowledging Chris and Elizabeth and thanking them for their service and for their work. Brother DeCurtis almost wept. I mean, his voice was cracking. He was trying to keep from weeping. And he shared with Chris and I later, he's the only American missionary on the island of Bohol. And he said, sometimes it gets pretty lonely when you don't have somebody that thinks like you do and understands like you do. So our being there was a great refreshing to him and a great relief. Saturday we didn't have services, so the pastors took the day with us and took us around. These are the Chocolate Hills. And they say at a certain time of the year when the grass turns brown, they look like Hershey Kisses. And this is one of the big tourist sites on Bohol. Very awesome, very beautiful. We made it back, and this is the last Wednesday night. They're getting ready for their teen Valentine banquet and then adult Valentine banquet. So you see stars on the side, and that was it. Yeah. So Okay, lights, please. There's several things that God did on this trip. My concern when I go on a missions trip, and it's something that I think churches should think about. I've heard horror stories of churches going on missions trips, taking their kids to a missionary and expecting the missionary to buy everything, pay for everything, and supply everything that the church people need. And the missionaries, basically, by the time the people leave, they're ready for them to leave. And I never want to feel that way, have felt that way towards me. And so I've always tried to be careful, ask, is there anything I can do? And things like that. And one of the things that they asked me to do with the North Cebu Baptist churches, with the transition, they have a new pastor, a national pastor who's never pastored. He's been an assistant pastor to a missionary who was an American. And so now this transition is taking place where a national is trying to run the church in a way that he sees fit and proper and that he's been trained in. But he sees the need for workers and helpers and not quite ready for deacons, so they wanted to have some trustees to try to help with the labor. And he wanted to get an idea. And so on the trip, when we were going to look at the church, the camp site at the schools and things, he's drilling me with questions. What do I think about this? What do I think? And so I trust God used me to try to help him understand some dangers. And I gave him some examples, both good and bad, of how people have blessed the church by their ministry and how people have hurt the church, and tried to give him some insight and things like that. And did I share this with you about the meeting that we had with the trustees? They scheduled a meeting for a Friday night at 7 o'clock. And if you know me, you know I don't like to be late. I would rather be 10 minutes early than 5 minutes late. And so we're getting there right at 7, and I'm all kind of nervous and all antsy, and I'm prepared to say some things, and I'm ready to go, And Chris says, no, it'll be all right. There's probably not going to be anybody here yet anyway. And sure enough, we get there right at 7, and nobody's there. The first guy doesn't show up till 7:15. And that wasn't the pastor, by the way. He showed up somewhere in the middle time. The last guy shows up at 8:30. The meeting starts at 7, folks. The last guy shows up at 8:30. We don't start the meeting until everybody's there. So at 8:30, we order our food. And we don't start the meeting because we're eating. We're just having a good time, talking, laughing, ha, 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 ha. And I'm kind of like, I kind of figured we'd be home by 9, but that ain't going to happen. And we only stopped the meeting because the place closed at midnight. And Chris said, well, they would have talked another hour. I said, really? Don't they have to work? Yeah, no, they have jobs. They all have to go to work. They'll all be at work in the morning. But this is how the Filipinos, what we would call fellowship, together. They spend time like that. And they enjoyed that. They loved that. They got to know me and understand some of my concerns. And I tried to help them. And it was just it was a wonderful time. But my mind is thinking, my daughter's going to have to put up with the fact that her husband just may not come home, and there's nothing he can do about it. It's not like he's just out on a party binge or something. This is just Filipino culture. And so you have to understand the way that people think, the way that people do things, and have to be able to accept that and deal with that and not lose your testimony because they don't do things the way you think they ought to. And when you see things like that, you realize, well, maybe we do some things and stress ourselves out on things that really don't need to be. Because we think everything has to be a certain way. Now, I am one that believes in decently and in order. The Bible talks about that. But at the same time, there's some things that we probably emphasize incorrectly and create our own atmosphere of problems when it doesn't need to exist. I'm never going to expect you, and I don't want you to have a Filipino culture that would drive me crazy. And if I would have been here and had that happen, I would have been chomping at the bit, because I know I've got this and this, and I've got all these other things I've got planned to do, and you guys can't even show up at 7 o'clock. Well, that's not their nature. And not one person was upset besides me. Not one person was excited about it. That was just their normal way of doing things. And it showed me something about maybe, just because Americans do it a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way. And there's a certain level of, when we were on the island of Bohol, and we started with Brother DeCurtis, and then we traveled to the other side, you could see, you could tell by different things that you were getting into a more rural area, more provincial area, less sophisticated. On Ubay, even though it's on the ocean, there was no malls. The closest thing they had to a restaurant was a hamburger shop, and they took us there. We had some hamburgers there, and they just different. Their ketchup has some banana in it, so it has a different texture. It's more sweet, and it looks like blood. It just looks like blood. That takes a little getting used to when you slap that on your hamburger, because now you're not sure whether the hamburger's done or not. But when I saw the work being accomplished, and then I saw the work of, here we have a missionary coming home, may not be going back, and they're really not ready for him to be gone, because there's not really anybody to fill that spot. They were wanting Chris to take that church, but Chris didn't believe that was God's will. And because God's doing some work out of North Cebu Baptist, that he's training the young people and trying to get them prepared so they can take those kinds of work, and he's going to help, like Brother Walter, going to their aid and helping them start churches and give them encouragement, and be a helper to those people. And I thought, how everybody needs to see how critical it is that we all play a part in the ministry of the church. If enough people sit out, if enough people linger back and just don't involve themselves, a church can whittle down to nothing and die. And the cause of Christ is hurt by people who won't involve themselves. Look in your Bibles to Philippians chapter 4. Here we have the Philippian Christians who were persecuted and in great distress economically. They did not have wealth, but they had heart. And they had a heart for the things of God. They were thankful for their salvation, and they were thankful for the work of a missionary who brought to them the plan of salvation. And so even though there were more wealthy churches and more capable churches that could have brought to the need of the Apostle Paul, it was one of the poorest churches that did the best job. How do we know that? Paul says so. Look in chapter 4 of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 9. He kind of is giving a summary of what he's been telling them. He talks about them thinking on the right things in verse 8. And then verse 9 he says, "Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me," what's the word? Do. It's not enough to learn, to receive, to hear, and see. It's not enough to just hear and understand what we're supposed to be. We must put it in action and do. "And the God of peace shall be with you. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me has flourished again." Now when you see the word again, what does that mean? It's happened before. They have seen what the needs of the Apostle Paul were, and they sent to his need. And now they're doing it again, and Paul is acknowledging that. And he says, wherein ye were also careful, but ye lacked opportunity. So there were times when they wanted to do more, but there was nothing they could do about it. And there's part of me, I shared with both Brother DeCurtis and with Brother Raxon, if I lived in the Philippines, seeing the multitude of the people in Cebu and in Tagbaglion especially, the big cities, I think I would be overwhelmed by the sense of how small we were compared to the need that was out there. Cebu City is 2.1 million people, and when Sinulog is there, you have people come from all around the island, and there are 4 million people there. And the opportunities are endless. And I would feel so inadequate. And really, but the reality is we are inadequate. We can't do the work that God has called us to just out of our sheer willpower, out of our sheer desire. We need God in our lives, both individually and corporately, so that God can do greater things with and through us than we could on our own ability. And so Paul is acknowledging what they have done, even though they lacked opportunity. And then notice the attitude of the Apostle Paul. There's such a strike of balance here. How does a missionary ask for help so that the ministry can grow without looking like he is needy? That he's out for your money. Maybe you've heard missionaries referred to as moochinaries. I think that's a disrespectful thing to the title of the missionary. Though there are missionaries that may be like that, and I know there are. Not necessarily in our group. If I knew of a missionary that was doing that, we would not support them. At least I'd bring it to your attention so we would make that decision together. But a missionary has the task of trying to raise the funds and have enough money to accomplish the work that God sets before him. Paul Peruki was a missionary for many years in Romania. I consider him the Apostle Paul of Europe because he didn't make tents, but he knew how to do plumbing, he knew how to do welding, he knew how to build buildings. And if a missionary had a need, he would go from his country. He came to Brother O'Brien's in Ukraine and did their plumbing so that they could have running water and sewage and all that sort of thing. He had been to other countries to help other missionaries, and at the same time he was building a work for God in Romania. And now he's back in the States. But I remember him saying when he was on deputation, and I remember talking to him about this. I said, well, what support level are you at? And he says, well, I think that's the wrong question. I said, really? I'm just being honest. I said, I don't need to know how much, but I'd like to know what percentage you think you're at. And he says, well, I put it this way. If I have 100% of my supply, I can do the things that I know that we need to do. But if I get more support, then I can expand my ministries. The more support I get, it all goes to the ministry. So the more I get in, the more I can accomplish. So what percentage should I seek? I don't know. Because that's up to God. If God wants a ministry, he'll supply the need for it. That is what is behind. When you have people say, I can do all things through Christ, do you really understand what the concept of that is behind? That is based upon your giving unto the Lord for the ministries that you're supporting. When you are of the mindset, and that's what Paul says. He says, not that I speak in respect of want, in verse 11, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. So here's a missionary who's saying, I'm thankful and I'm grateful for your supply to me, that you have met my need more than once. But I don't want you to think that I'm needy or that God is not taking care of me, because God has, but he's using you to do that in a great way. You've come to my need, you've come to my supply, but I don't want you to think that I am covetous or a worldly person. That's kind of the idea that he's putting forth here. He says in verse 12, I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. That means I know how to live like a Filipino and I know how to live like an American. And based on what God allows, I can be content with either side. I can do that. Not many people can say that. Number one reason missionaries come home, I've told you, the missionary wife gets discontented on the mission field. She's miserable. All her friends are back home. All her family's back home, and she's built for security and structure. It takes a special woman to go to Malapascua, where they raise their own chickens, they raise their own beef, they raise their own pork, and they grow their own garden because that's what they have to do, because there's no supermarket on the island. They're self-sustaining. It takes a special person. I know that's what Americans used to do. But not many women in America could handle that lifestyle today. Or I should say, not many want to. It's much easier to go to Walmart. But he says, I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry. When you're hungry, do you complain that you're hungry? Paul is saying, I've learned how to be hungry and be content with that. Both to abound and to suffer need. And in that mindset, then he says, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. That means he can be without. He can do without all the necessities, the niceties, all the comfortable things. To me, on my trip, that means I can learn to take a shower when it's cold. They're much quicker showers. Save a lot on water bills because I'm not going to take nearly as long. But I can also enjoy a good hot shower. But if God would need me to, I could learn how to live that way. That's the idea behind I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. I can learn how to live in any condition that God allows me to be in. That is not the American mindset. He goes on to say, notwithstanding ye have well done that ye did communicate with my affliction. That means that they met the needs of his lifestyle, the things that he needed to have, they were willing to communicate that with him. Verse 15, now ye Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but ye only. So at the start of this, for even in Thessalonica ye sent once and again unto my necessity, not because I desire a gift, but I desire fruit that may abound to your account. Again, here's the mindset of the missionary. Even though it's hard for me to take from a struggling, poor, afflicted church, I know that as you give that to my need, God will supply your desire and your need. God can make you abound and be all that is required of you. So here we have the missionary side of receiving and the mindset that a missionary has to have. And I had some conversation with Chris about this. It's very hard when the church in Ubai gave me a love offering of 500 pesos. That's huge to them. That's half of Brother Raxon's salary for a month. They gave it to me. And he enjoyed doing it. They were pleased that they could give me an offering like that. And I had to figure out how I could, because I had already determined, and Joyce and I had already talked about, before I left there, I was going to leave some money with Peter, not with him directly, but I gave Brother Raxon some money for Peter on his behalf so that he would always have a means to get what he needed. And then I left some for Brother Raxon, but I had to do it in a way that didn't look like I was just returning their money. That takes some thought. You start realizing it's not about It's not about the gift. It's more about the character. How do you give to a Filipino without ruining their desire? That's why we support Brother Lampo for $25 instead of $50, because they're not, $50 a month to an African is huge, and you could potentially warp their thinking and hurt their mindset, that they lose this contentment that Paul talks about. Not because he desired a gift, but that they might abound by their fruit of that. Notice verse 18, Paul says, "But I have all and abound." Now, if you took a list of all the things that he was lacking, you say, what's he talking about? He doesn't have everything he needs. It's the attitude that you're supposed to maintain and keep. Having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you. So they sent some things to the Apostle Paul. An odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. And so the apostle, as the missionary, receives this sacrificial gift, knowing that these people don't have this to give, but they, out of the love that they had for God, would give to Paul's account. And Paul has to receive that and sense God working in their lives. Chris said it was very hard to try to teach the Filipinos missions giving, because coming from America, we look like we're the wealthy people, and the wealthy people are telling the poor people, you need to give more. But coming from a national pastor, when Pastor Lewis came back to the States, they were doing well with supporting missionaries. When they determined to do it all with Filipino money, not missionary support, and people decided they would step out on faith, Pastor Albert, he was praying for 20,000 pesos. You've already seen what they pledged, 32. And they're like, how can these people give so much when they have so little? That's what Paul was dealing with in the Philippian church. And he had to be careful. He couldn't just say, no, I'm not taking your money because you guys need it, because that would have squandered their heart's desire to serve God. And then he says, and you know this verse too, but my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. You cannot outgive God. I was almost ashamed when they gave me that 500 pesos. The first Sunday we were there, on Saturday we had gone to the mall to exchange money, so I had pesos. And it's troubling that every time you go to buy something, you try to calculate, is this a good deal or not? And you try to convert from pesos to dollars, and we weren't doing very good at it. And when they passed the offering around, my wife says, give them 20 pesos. I'm like, wait a minute. That's 40 cents. You're going to throw 40 cents in the offering? Give me a break. And, we're thinking of 20. Whew, that's not bad. It ain't a $20 bill. 40 cents. Woohoo, big spender. Come from America, did you? Doing pretty good. And Paul, as he saw the Philippians, I saw in the North Cebu Baptist Church a growth and a willingness and an excitement, because they were having a part, and they had already put in air conditioning in their church by their money. They took up offerings, and by the Filipinos giving, they put in air conditioning. Praise the Lord. Now, their air conditioning, probably runs at about 75 degrees, so it's not exactly cold. And some of the ladies would say, praise the Lord for that. But they paid for it. Then the next thing they need to do is upgrade their electric. The electric is old in the church and they need to upgrade it, and they got an estimate, and the estimate was like 15,000 short of what it actually has become. He's already asked for them once to give. They gave everything they could, and they're 15,000 pesos short. So, what do they got to do now? They got to give again. And Pastor Elburn's like, man, I don't know how much I can ask them to give. Plus, they're trying to give towards their missionaries. And I look at that and I say, man, are we even sacrificing? And some of those people have to be giving a fourth of their income. You know why they're giving it? Because they see the value of their church. And the American missionary that started the church is no longer there. And Chris's money now is going to be dispersed through all these other ministries and all these other places and the church camp and everything that the American missionaries paid for, now it's on Chris's lap. So he's got to pay for the camp and different things, and they're getting others to help, but it has become a different animal, so to speak. And they see, hey, if we don't step up, we may not have a church. That's true of our church. Nobody's going to do it for us. And I look at the sacrifice that the Filipinos, because they're excited about their church and they see, and I tried, the last service that I preached, I said to them, I have seen your missionaries serving God and building a work. You have that to your account. That's part of the sacrifice. As I said this morning, and I said, that's where I came up with this thought. You know, when we get to heaven, nobody's going to be able to say, you know, I really wish I wouldn't have given quite so much to God. I really wish I wouldn't have gone to church as much. I really wish I wouldn't have given as much. No, none of us are going to say that. We're all going to say, I wish I wouldn't have wasted my money on the things of this world. You know, when a pastor says to you, you know, on a mission conference, you know, one day you're going to stand in heaven and you're going to meet people that are going to be thankful that you sent a missionary to them. I got to shake some hands of those people. I got to meet the people those are ones we're talking about. I never would have heard of Ubai. Never heard of it before. I thought I was on the wrong island. God showed me some things on this trip. Oh. I'm going to reevaluate my own giving, reevaluate my own living, and I want to get back to where we're training and discipling, because that's really where the meat of the ministry is. Training people to go out and train other people who will train other people who will train other people. And we see a work established that would honor God and go perpetually out from our hands. I hope you see what I see and recognize what Paul was talking about in his struggle to understand how a church so poor could give, and how he had to respond in such a way that didn't stifle their giving but encouraged it and caused them to have fruit to their account. And I want you to think about what it is that your priorities are all about. My goals used to be about football, and God changed those. You know, we quote Spurgeon a lot in Baptist circles, but you know he was a smoker? Most churches wouldn't even have him as a pastor in their church because of his habits. But did you know he gave up smoking? He gave up smoking when he saw one day in the front of a store somebody was advertising Spurgeon's tobacco. And he said, I do not want to be known my whole life as someone with tobacco. That's not what I want my name to be surrounded by. And I wonder, what legacy do you want to leave in this life? When you can see I took pictures, and again, if you want to see all of them, I'll be glad to come to your house. I would love to go through the 500 and some pictures and explain what they are and tell you what they are. And I would show you some fun things and some interesting things and some looky things, and you get the whole realm, and maybe you have a better picture than what I showed tonight. But my goal is to help you to see that there is a world of people that are counting on us to do the right thing, to be a church the way God called us to be a church, to be sacrificially giving for the benefit of the furtherance of the gospel. And there are people that need our faithfulness so that they can perpetuate the faithfulness to others, and that growth can take place. And I want you to be a part of that with me. Would you consider that tonight? We'll have a word of prayer, and then we'll have our invitation. I know I've gone along tonight. I hope it's been a benefit to you. And I trust that you'll seek God out in your life. And you can see where we are as a church. We need to invite folks here. We need to get people into church. We need to get people saved. We need to grow our church. But we have an area around us that needs to be reached. There's the rest of the world that needs to be reached. And I hope you'll join with me to be a part of that. Let's all stand. Have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your goodness. I want to thank you, Lord, for letting me go on this trip. Far more than just a time of relaxation, though there was that. But Lord, I got to meet people that have been influenced through our ministry and through missionaries that we support. And lives have been changed, and churches have souls to their record because they gave and they sacrificed and they had the desire and the need to do great things. And I pray, Father, you would work in our midst, Lord. May we as a church desire together to be the church that you have designed. That we would not seek to glorify ourselves or our own ministries here, but Lord, we would just use these things to spread forth the gospel, and that churches would be planted, lives would be changed, and the people would be gathered for your harvest. I pray that you would bless now this invitation as only you can. We pray it in Christ's name. Amen.
Hymn 276 will have two verses. Hymn 276, no one comes, come for invitation. Hymn 276, where he leads me, I'll follow. I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. Take thy cross and follow, follow me. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow.
apologize for going long tonight. I didn't intend to do that, but you got to see some things that we may never be able to take that kind of time again to look at those things. I hope you'll treasure some of those things and see that God is doing things around the world. I wish I could do that for every missionary we had.
Amen.
Go and spend some time with them, be an encouragement. The fact that because we were coming, they wanted to put the lights in, and now they can have their services in the evening. I think that was a great compliment to us, but a great motivator. When we have special things, we do things like that. We try to improve things and try to make it a little bit better. And I think it was a good testimony for Brother Raxley. Praise the Lord. Pray for Chris and Elizabeth and the kids. And pray for Brother Joe DeCurtis and his wife. I believe her name is Ann. And pray for her health. Amazing work. If you could see what they did in 13 years, you'd be amazed at how they did it and accomplished some great things. Yeah. I'm going to go home and go to bed. Amen. It's been a good day. I've enjoyed being back. One thing that I don't always come back from a trip like that refreshed, and I came back refreshed and excited, ready to get back to work, ready to do some things here, and it was a great blessing. And I want you to be encouraged that what we are doing here does make a difference around the world. It does make a difference, and that is around the world, let me tell you. I didn't talk about the people that I witnessed to, but there's opportunities. There might be people from San Diego that got saved because we witnessed to them while we were enjoying the scenery and things around us. And even met some Russians. Now, how you just can't make this stuff up. Met some Russians, and I tried to find out, and they didn't speak real good English, and obviously I don't know Russian. And I didn't have any Jonathan's tracts with me. Didn't think a Cebuano tract would help them all. But just interesting how God put some things together and gave us opportunity. And so you pray for their needs there, and pray for those who heard the Word of God, and pray that God was glorified, and that God would use this church to do that in every situation that we support and around the world. Amen. Brother John, would you close us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you in prayer.